Okay, since it's due, I think we can start the webinar. So, good afternoon, everyone, or morning or evening, depending on where you're watching this from. I hope you all are doing well, staying safe from the pandemic. First of all, I would like to thank you all for joining, and thank you, Mr. Ian, for joining us as well. We hope to learn some cool stuff on game development through this webinar. And I'm also excited for this webinar because I'm a student as well, and I think that game development is a very interesting topic. So, our speaker today for the webinar is Mr. Ian Hughes, also known as ePredator. He is a software engineer and the chair of BCS Animation and Games SG. He's been interested in gaming since the 70s, and he discusses the inspiration behind his career choice in a BCS article called Memories of a Boredom Coder. I will provide the link for that in the MS Teams chat box, or if you're viewing this on YouTube, it's provided in the description box already. Mr. Ian has spent 20 years in IBM building emerging technology, and he has written 2 sci-fi novels called Reconfigure and Context. There's a 3 instead of an E in context. Following the interest in game tech, he set up Feeding Edge Limited in 2009. Again, the links will be provided either in the chat box or they're already in the YouTube description, so you can refer to those. He was presented with a Doctor of Technology award from Southampton University in 2018. He's worked as an industry analyst in SD and Global Market Intelligence for the past 5 years. And if you would like to contact Mr. Ian, the information link will be provided again in the chat box, or I don't think this one is provided in the YouTube description, but it will be provided in the live chat instead. So yeah, that's an introduction to this webinar. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Hughes.
Excellent, thank you very much. That was a wonderful intro. Let me just switch across and get this show on the road with a bit of PowerPoint. There will be some live demos, hopefully. That's the plan, always the plan, but live demos never seem to work when you really want them to. But let's see how this goes. So yes, so thank you. So I am Ian Hughes. I'm also called ePredator online, so you can find me most places as ePredator. Long story where that came from, but it's my name. And I've been asked today to come and talk to you about, say, the serious business of play. So games are fun, but they're also a $200 billion industry. And so in kind of describing what this stuff is, I want to do a little bit of intro, so a little bit more about who I am and why you might or might not want to listen to me. There's also a little bit of the history of game development, because that helps inform us as to where this stuff might go. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the genres of games. That we won't dwell on that too long, but then talk about the roles and the skills in game development, because it's not necessarily just all coding, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. And I want to try and show you how you can get started. I'm not going to lead you completely down the path, but just maybe give you a little push in the right direction, and then maybe a few plot twists, some other things to think about as we go along. And happy to take questions. I can't see chat while I'm presenting, but if there's any questions come up, please fire them at me. I'm more than happy to talk either now or afterwards, or even after the event. So as I said, I'm called ePredator online. This is my ever-growing set of pictures of weird and wonderful things that I've been involved with over the years. Amongst other things, I mean, in the top right there, I did a lot of work when I was at IBM in Second Life, which is a virtual world. And that was back in 2006, and we were busy doing things like putting Wimbledon, the tennis event, into a shared social virtual world space. Could call it a game, maybe not. And also down the bottom left there, I also spent a few years on children's TV talking about this sort of stuff in a little slot I had where I was kind of super geek on Cool Stuff Collective. So all these things all come from me being a programmer, essentially. But you can start as a programmer. I'm still a programmer, but you can then build and go and take this stuff anywhere. And it's all my entire career has been inspired by gaming, as was mentioned in the intro. But it's been going much longer than me. I mean, I'm getting on a bit, but just as a bit of history, going back to Space War in 1962. So MIT, the guys there kind of got together and decided to use this fledgling computer, the DEC PDP-1, to build a 2-player game. So this was couch co-op straight away. So it wasn't anything about AI or any of the fancy stuff that we have in game environments now. But 59 years ago, and you can see it's quite an unusual looking device, but it was 2 spaceships and a gravity well shooting at one another. And the entire program from that was done. I mean, you had to mainly write it down on a piece of paper, but it was done with punch cards and a control panel. Very different to what we've got 60 years later. It's much easier to build games now. But because the games that are being built now are very varied, but have turned into some fantastically interesting pieces of work. I'm not going to list all the games here, but there's just Assassin's Creed Valhalla on consoles and PC is a huge, beautiful, free roaming environment. Just the visuals alone, forgetting any of the story or the gameplay, are just fantastic, and the level of detail that you get in those is incredible. And for me, amongst other things, it's got a place in it that I remember as a child. Now, I wasn't around in the Viking days, not far off, but Borough Castle in Norfolk, where I grew up, is in this game. It's a place that we used to go to as kids and run around a kind of dilapidated fort and play pretend hero. And now I get to do that on my console, sat on my sofa. So it's this stuff is able to reach kind of right into us as people and our memories and our experiences and stuff. So games are a very touching way to engage with technology, but it doesn't all have to be these kind of mammoth scenery. My family and I, we play Animal Crossing still every day. We still visit, we're still trading turnips, we're still building things and sending one another birthday gifts and stuff. My wife and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary because of lockdown in here. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it really works. It's incredibly good fun. And then because you've got other kind of edge experiences, if you like. So Fortnite had the Travis Scott rap gig, which was a pre-built animation experience and music experience, but dropped into the Fortnite game environment. So, but the key about this was it was an event. It only happened a few times. You had to be there. You can't go and do it now. It's gone. So it's got that transient nature to it. But you know, we were all in there enjoying this music. Well, not all of us, but lots of us were in there enjoying this wonderful experience. And so this is all part of the games industry and the blurring of that with the media industry, if you like. And when I think back to those early days when I was, you know, just starting out and as a kid trying to learn to code, we had these wonderful computers. We had a ZX81, eventually C64, and onto Amigas, and then onto PCs. But my first paid programming gig, if you like, was I wrote a lunar lander program for the Commodore 64, all written in BASIC, and sent it to a magazine called Computer and Video Games. They published listings of games, so you had to type it in. If you want to play it, you had to type it in. And we were all learning how to program because we didn't have the internet or the web. We were all learning to program from other people's games. So you see how somebody's done something, you try it out yourself, you can kind of keep building on what they're doing. But so I got paid a whole £10, which back in '84 was a lot of money. I was only a kid. But the thing for me is that that's still there. That's been archived and is on the web. I mean, old games don't die, and you can run it on emulators. I managed to pick this up, well, sort of last year sometime. Somebody sent me it to say where it was, and I now have my cherished first piece of game programming that got published on an emulator, and I can show my kids. It's a very very interesting. Obviously, it's not quite up to today's graphics and standards of gameplay, but if you look on the right there, this is what I do now. Less maybe less building these things and more playing them. But in playing these things, there's still lots of creative input you can put into mini games. So driving around in Forza Horizon in a car that I used to own, I used to have a Subaru, and I've got a lovely electric car, which is fantastic. But this Scooby, I've customed up. So using the game tools, I've built my the logo of the martial art that I practice and train in, and even my book cover. Sorry, even my book cover is on there as well. And the interesting thing with this is that now, as I'm driving round, the game is learning how I drive. It's learning my driving style in what they call a drivatar. And when I'm not playing the game, my style of driving and my drivatar is appearing in other people's living rooms around the world with this car, and they are racing me in all intents and purposes. So it's a little AI version of me embedded in this game that's purely created by the way I do things. And I find that is, again, an interesting twist on whether that's game development or not. It's part of the gaming environment, and something that engagement with people is something that's worth considering as we kind of go forward through this stuff. But a question, I'm not sure how many of you are gamers or not. Lots of people come to me professionally. I mean, this is me just talking as a BCS person, but rather than an industry analyst. But people come to me and say, we want to know about games, we're not gamers, which is fair enough. But I think most people are gamers one way or another. Maybe they don't know that they are, because some of the games we play aren't as obvious maybe as diving into Assassin's Creed. But a game is there, unlike other software, is there really to tell a story. And narrative is the most important thing, I would say, in gaming. And it doesn't mean that everything has to be a Hollywood script and you have to follow that story. Those exist. There are things where there are missions and stories to be told and an order to do things. But even the simplest of puzzle games has a little backstory, possibly, or a reason that game exists. And then as you play any game, as people, we form our own stories and our own narratives. I mentioned Assassin's Creed, Valhalla. For me, whilst there is a mission to go to that castle, to Borough Castle, that place that not very many people know in the UK, it's cherished for me as a kid. So that's where I used to play. So there's another narrative that forms for me and an experience that I get. Now, if you look at other pieces of software, nothing against them, but a spreadsheet or an industrial automation system or or a text editor, those things don't exist in order to give you that kind of buzz. And the thing to remember that this is the core of what games are, and it's narrative and story. And of course, these stories can be individual, they can be completely private, they can be little thoughts in your head, or they can be shared experiences with friends or with anyone you happen to be playing with. You sometimes go online and play, meet somebody, you're never going to see them again, but you've had that shared experience. And one of the first things I'd heartily recommend looking at if you're going to start trying to build games of any sort, not just even video games, is Raf Costa's The Theory of Fun for Game Design. It's a book he wrote 10, 15 years ago, possibly. And he's worked in the games industry for a very long while, and done an awful lot of interesting things that you might want to kind of look up his history. And in that book, there's lots of pictures for a start, so it's easy for me to just flick through as well. There's some good descriptions, but there's memorable little sketches about what drives your willingness to play a game, how you get bored, or how you learn, or how you're challenged, or how you're pushed. And it's well worth. It's something I still, even whatever I'm doing, I'll occasionally just pick it up. It's on my shelf just to my left. Pick it up and flick through, and I generally get inspired by something, or remember a game element, or that was interesting, wasn't it? That was challenging. Even down to I love the example I've got in there about noughts and crosses. It's one of a simple game of a hash with noughts and crosses, 2-player, not even a video game. As a kid, that's fascinating the first couple of times you play it, because it's the rules are simple and you're going to outwit somebody. But few iterations through, and it becomes a draw inevitably between everyone. It's very difficult to win, because everyone gets the rules of the game and that's it, it's done. But for that joy that you have for that short period of time while you're learning it and trying to dominate or win or enjoy is interesting. Now, how you apply that to other types of games and other types of experience is a valuable insight. And say he's full of things like that in his book. So take a look at that. I'm not on a kickback from him or anything. I just think it's a wonderful book. Now, genres of games. For those of you that aren't gamers, and for those of you that are gamers, I apologise, because you will have seen all this before. But if you're not a gamer, games are not one thing. They are not just a little platform game where somebody's jumping around. They are not all shooting things. They are not all live and real time. Some are turn-based. Some are puzzlers. Some are based on music. Some are more about strategy. Some are more about simulation. Some are just about collecting things. And so all these genres of game exist and will continue to exist and grow. And many games combine one or many of these into their genre. You quite often end up in free roaming games with stopping and just playing cards with somebody, like in Red Dead Redemption. You end up playing poker. That's another game in a genre to help tell the story. But even more than that, when you layer on the modes of interaction that you might have in these games, not every game is just about you in the game. There are multiplayer games. There are games that are designed and better on mobile devices, more quick hit, have a quick go on something. There are social games. There's the couch co-op, as I said, split screen game. There's also the evolution of cloud gaming, where you don't even have a game machine because everything's done remotely and rendered remotely on a cloud machine and streamed to you. There's augmented reality and virtual reality, AR and VR. There's games that exist just for that moment. It's just kind of that's all you're doing. And then there's games that persist for years or decades even, where each time you visit, you are adding to it. And so there's no one thing that says it's a game or not, for a start, and no one genre and no one dominant thing. And this again keeps evolving. If you think we went from that deck machine with Space War, which was actually multiplayer, it was on the same screen rather than split screen, but now we've got all these other things that we can feed our interest in games with, either as playing or making, and that you can pick a genre and stick with it, or you can just make up your own or mix and match as you see fit, which is the beauty of this stuff. And just another thing to consider, Professor Richard Bartle over here in the UK is in the 70s he co-invented multi-user dungeons. So these were text-based adventure games, but it was primarily about how people engaged online. And so it was a long while ago, but this still applies, that the studies that he's done and the papers he's written and people have built on since around what they call Bartle types indicate different ways people choose to engage, typically with multiplayer games. And not everyone is one thing or the other, and there are lots of levels of this, and this is just a little picture that tries to show some of the scope of that. But if you think you might enter an environment in order to explore it, to know to try and find something, to feel you're expanding knowledge in some way. It might be game knowledge, like Minecraft. You turn up in Minecraft and wander around and discover things if you want. It might be that you actually want to score points. You want to feel a level of achievement. And most games now have achievements in them to some degree. They tell you, congratulations, you've done this extra thing, or here's your high score. There's always been in there. Or it may just be to socialise, just hang out. Or the game almost doesn't matter. It's a mechanic, just like golf is a mechanic for people to hang out and talk to one another. And then it's described as killers. That's not necessarily actually killing, but that might be player versus player kind of combat or domination, if you like, which is kind of sits up there with achievement, but that's competition and competitive elements to things. And all these, again, all of us as gamers, we may have our preference for a certain type of game, but I'm sure we all flow through all these types. So well worth doing a little look around about battle types and all the variants that people have come up with, just to get to know why people game. And just a bit of an aside here, I just want to show some things that I've done in the past as well that are game technology, but not games as such. And back in 2010 for Imperial College, I was helping to build a training simulation for doctors, but we were building it in the virtual world Second Life. So it's a shared virtual world space, but we were turning it into something quite serious if you look at it that way. But this was about people being able to interact together and talk around a patient and ask the patient questions and things like that. But it was all done in something that people thought was all about dancing and partying and weirdness and stuff like that. But you can build anything with these environments, and you don't have to necessarily stick to all those things that I mentioned in game genres or player types. But if you like, this is a discovery and this is educational. And training and trying to help people get through something. And this, the following year, we kind of turned it into a major incident rehearsal project. So we went from one patient to a whole hospital of patients. And building this was being built with the people that were going to use it in it whilst I was building it, which doesn't often happen. Most things we build, somebody else is about something, you build it and then you give it to them and then they ask for some changes. But this, they could join me in the environment and say, well, can we move this over here? Can we change how this works? And so it was a very live environment. And say this is a while ago now. And that then shifted as well from that shared virtual environment. We then moved to Unity, and I'll mention a bit more about Unity in a little while. But Unity as a game development engine, many games are built, AAA games, high-end games, and kind of DIY games and stuff are built in Unity. And we changed it from being that shared virtual world to being a completely focused, self-contained project to help train more than one person in a hospital to interact with one another while things were occurring. And it was a really interesting project, and there were only actually two of us building it. I was writing code and structuring stuff, and a graphic designer was helping build the artifacts and stuff there. And it's amazing how much you can now. I mean, that was in 2012, but even now it's got even easier for fewer and fewer people to build more and more things. It used to be the case you needed a massive team of people to do anything because it would just take forever to build all the parts. Anyway, there's some kind of pieces that I thought might be useful for you. So, game development roles. Now, one of the reasons we formed the animation games specialist group was that I know from my experience in IT that if you mention games, lots of people turn off and think it's not proper computing. And I'd certainly had that conversation with other people in BCS. And particularly when I was working at IBM, I was using a lot of games technology to do things. And yet that was possibly not normal IT. And so we're trying to help people in BCS and around the world kind of understand what's in games and the depth to which you have to go to get those things done. But it also actually works the other way around, because lots of games companies don't think they're part of the IT industry. I don't think we have lots of members of BCS from games companies because they're a kind of a world to themselves. But there are those of us that kind of cross over those boundaries, or try to. And so if you look at a regular IT project, it's fairly similar on the left there, you have architects and project managers, programmers, testers, UI people, security, some support, because, well, things have to run forever now, don't they? And a game project has all those of a normal IT project, but then because of all those elements that have engagement that you have to have with this thing, you've got things. This is not a definitive list, like story writers and AI programmers and music composers. I'm not going to read them all out. You can see them there on there. But even things down to it's not as simple to just be a graphic designer. In a 2D world, you can be a designer and move pixels around and color things and make nice shapes and make something look good in a user interface. But if you're then trying to build a person who's walking around and moving, the elements of animation of a 3D object is a whole other art form. And it's very varied as well. And there are people that specialize just in animation. There are people that specialize just in 3D modeling. And so there's a whole host of niches, if you like, in the games industry that all have to come together along with all the standard IT stuff. So if you're good at IT, then you can help keep a game on track, and you can focus and be a programmer and just do those pieces. But if you've got any of these other interests, if you're interested in music or interested in art or anything, or even storytelling, you can bring those to a game. That's the joy of it, that you can find those extra pieces. So it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. I think you can fit into game development in some way, if you have an interest and a passion for it, obviously. And I've just got a thing here from Yuki over here, which is an organisation that represents some of the UK games publishers, and they did this survey on what are the roles and how many of them are there across their membership. As you can see, sort of 21% of people are programmers or development of some kind, but then you get some of those and even more of those things that I just mentioned. You've got the traditional IT tech support infrastructure in there. You've got PR and communications and human resources, obviously, but you then have the niches like a composer down at the bottom, or 2% doing animation, technical art. That's another complete branch of how you visualize this stuff. So the message from this is, whoever you are, whatever you do, there is potential to hit the games industry with that, and to grow, and to even find new skills and new interests. But getting started in games, because that's probably what you all want to hear. It's very easy to say, but just do start. As I say there, that hole isn't going to dig itself. There's the options with which to start game development are almost as varied as the number of games and the number of players and number of people in the world. And I mentioned when I started, it was us listings typing in, a very insular, isolated thing. Now we're all connected. We can find things. There are projects all over the place. You can find code that other people have volunteered and stuff like that, as well as a whole load of tooling that's going to help you kind of get to that point of being able to build stuff. You don't have to build everything from complete zero. You can if you want, but you'll be doing that for a long while. And one of the examples of a thing that you may have come across, but Scratch, again from MIT. Remember MIT with the progenitors with Space War. Scratch is a purely online web-based environment for being able to put these blocks of code together. I mean, it's visual programming. It's still programming, and this is taught in primary skills, but it's not just because it's for little kids. It helps them understand what a loop is, or what a variable is, or any of the basics of that, and they can do all sorts of wonderful things very quickly as well. But you can go on there, and people, just like I mentioned with the listings, my listing got published, but now if I write something on Scratch, I can choose to share how it works with everyone. And so if you see a little game, whether it's a Space Invaders or they don't all have to be games, or a little movie or a little animation, you can look at this structure and this is just a random one I picked out called Galaxy Invaders 1.1, and see how that person has built that. What are the tricks they've used? What are they're not necessarily the best way, but it's a way to do something. And so you've got somewhere to start. It's not just a blank sheet of paper. And so I'd, even as a first port of call, if you haven't done any of this stuff at all, just understanding what happens when you animate and move something across the screen and it bumps into something and you get an event happen. I mean, that's the core of the game loop of most things. You can just explore just that piece. You're not going to be building Assassin's Creed or Grand Theft Auto or anything in this, but the core of what you're doing is really important. And so learning that on here with no obstacles, just dive in, have a go. There's also a lot of support, a lot of tutorials, so this is well worth having a look at. But if you want to do something a bit heavier, a bit more complicated, you've got things like Unity. Now, I mentioned Unity before. This has been my, the thing that I've used the most over the years, over the decades, in fact, I think. And Unity provides the ability to kind of import a lot of other people's assets and buy things from the asset store and things like that. But you can just write everything from scratch. But it's got all the supporting things about physics and audio and animation and stuff to try and help you craft the thing that you need to craft and potentially work as a team across it. And you'll see the Unity logo pop up on an awful lot of games, both paid and free. And it runs on Mac, which is what I was using at the time, but it's on Windows and Linux as well. And it's worth having a look at. It's free as well. If you're particularly a student, if you're not a business making a lot of money, you can just download Unity and have a go. But in the spirit of trying to figure out something new, there's also Unreal. Now, Unreal Engine, I think yesterday they just announced or unveiled their most recent version. So Unreal 5, I think we're on now. But Unreal is very like Unity in what it does and where it sits, but just has a slightly different approach. Like all platforms do. You're still trying to build a game, but there's different things you might want to do with it. And so I recently installed Unreal, and if you just go into it, and rather than do this bit live, I'm just going to click through the first things you do when it says create a project. So it says, do you want to build a game? Or do you want to build a film? Or do some architecture? Or do some product design? You can see the kind of level of things that these environments are able to help you do. So you click on, yeah, I'd like to do a game. And then it says, well, do you want to start from scratch with absolutely nothing? Which you can do if you want. Or it presents you with all these templates of things that can help you start your gaming journey. And so here I just clicked, yeah, give me a third person wandering around thing. I mean, but as you see, there's sort of twin stick shooters and VR and driving cars around and things. They're a starting point. Then it asks you one more thing. About whether you want to run ray tracing and fancy settings, but the top left there, it says, do you want to make it a programming project where you're going to have to write C++, which is fine, if that's what you want to do, or do you want to use what they call blueprints? And blueprints are, if you like, a much more complicated version of Scratch. So it's a way of structuring and joining events and things visually that you can use to structure and create games. Now, when you click create project, you end up waiting just a few minutes as it kind of sparks up. And then hopefully I'm just going to swap my sharing to something else. This is the magic of the internet. There we are, screen. We want that. You get this. Now, this is a development environment. This is Unreal. And what it's presented me with is this a object, a camera, a sort of figure, some scenery. It just threw all this in a little spinning question mark disc. Not quite sure how well the animation will work streaming on here, and so just without doing anything else, if I just click play, so this is running live on my machine, I now have been given a starting point of this character. I can move the camera around, I can walk up and down stairs, I can jump, and that was minutes away from just having, once you've installed Unreal, that is literally minutes away from being able to do that. Now that's not a high-end game yet, but I think that's pretty incredible to be able to just do that straight away. Now, this environment has so many things in that, say it's a professional tool as well, but again, it's free, so might as well give it a go. But if I do something like say, well, I'd like to add to this, I'd like to add a sphere in here. So I've now added the sphere. So I'm now back in the design world. And as I've added that, you maybe see, I mean, it might be a bit small on the screen, but there's a load of properties. If anything I click on, I get some properties on the right-hand side that tell me about that thing, okay? So I'm clicking on the sphere. It's telling me where it is and how big it is and stuff like that. So you can mess around with all sorts of things. But if I just press play now, you'll see that this sphere is now there. It's even got a shadow on the ground. I don't have to do anything yet. But that's, again, just added to the environment. It's an obstacle. Still not much gameplay in there, is there? So if I then look at that again and scroll over here, or maybe over here, physics. This thing has some physical attributes in the simulation. And if I just click simulate physics, if I can, there we are, physics is now turned on. So at the point I've written no code yet, I've just clicked one checkbox. When I click play, you can see it's dropped to the floor because we're now running the game. I'm moving the camera around. And then if I bump into it, it moves and it bounces off things. See that little kick that it had when it, as it bounced off that wall. Boom. So I'm not quite saying that's FIFA or a football game or even Rocket League, but we've actually got, we could implement something that was a goal to try and drive that in. We've created a very quick gaming prototype. Now there's plenty of other options for even for that. So I can make it simulate physics but turn gravity off. So I've just clicked enable gravity no, so that we have no gravity anymore just for that ball. So it's just going to sit there. But into it, it's going to fly around. It's just not being dragged to the floor. So we've now got almost basketball. Again, just through two little click boxes. Now you can imagine that under the covers here, there's an awful lot of other stuff going on. And I mentioned that the blueprints. So here, underneath that character that we move around, it's got this this blueprint, as I say, an event graph of how this thing moves. These are how it takes inputs, what it does to it, how it propels it forwards, what happens when you press a jump. And this then triggers a jump animation and things like that. But it's all structured in this blueprint approach, which again I think is pretty fascinating stuff. And you can go animations work in this way, lighting works in this way. You can build and change everything. I mean, you've got kind of cinematic things about how you move cameras, visual effects, lights, as well as under the covers you can just write code if that's what you want to do. But you can see up the top here you've got things like source control, so you can do version controlling on things. There's a marketplace to go to buy or download free, I mean there's lots of free assets, but you can, if you need a particular thing that you can't create yourself, you know, you can go and buy it. It's just some more downloadable content. And at the end of the day, you can compile this into something that will run outside the environment and just run as an executable or as an app. So I would highly recommend having a look at Unreal. Now I'm going to pop back to my my presentation over here. One moment. always fun when you kind of jumping around from one screen to another, isn't it? So the other thing you might want to do is look at Roblox. Now you may have come across Roblox. I mean, they recently went public as a company and got an awful lot of attention. And Roblox is a virtual world, not unlike Second Life. It's been around kind of that amount of time, but it now has Roblox Studio. And again, if I now go and change my sharing again, one day Teams will make this easier. But if I now share this, I'm running more than one thing at a time, so I hope the machine can cope. Roblox Studio. So this is Roblox Studio kind of running live. I'm logged in. It's Roblox you can run as a separate app, but this is the thing to help you design things. And rather like what I showed you with Unreal, you end up with some templates you want to start with. So for instance, I can say, let's have a racing game. Now this Roblox is not, or it's got a more cartoony look to it, but the underlying principles of what you're doing and the fun you can have with it is still the same. So now I've just clicked that. This is now a design file, was very much like we just saw in Unreal. I can move around, I can click on things, I've got properties about these things. I can move things, change things. Everything's up for grabs. This is just a starter pack, a starting point for what you might want to do. But the thing that Roblox has is the ability to, when you publish it, it goes into the Roblox environment so that you and your friends or anyone that you want to let in can come into this environment together. So you're getting multiplayer gaming straight away. And it's also got lots of things about how you can kind of, if you get good at it and get interest, how you can sell things to those people. So people are making money building games in that environment, leveraging the entirety of the Roblox scene, if you like. And if you get popular in here, just like if you get popular on YouTube and stuff like that, there's things that you can do. Not everyone's going to be able to do that, but you can at least build stuff or try stuff for free again. So if I click play, hopefully this will work. So this is now this environment running. Okay, so my little Roblox character, it'd be the one that you'd see if I went into normal Roblox, is now in this environment. And I can run around and I can do stuff. And hopefully, if I do it right, get in the car. So I'm now driving. And this is all in there, and you can explore the code on how you manage to get things to drive. And just change them. So I can say, well, I don't want that car starting there, I want that car starting there. And when I click play, that car will now be at the back, hopefully. There we are, it's gone. There it is over there, at the back there. And then, but as you can see, each of these things, rather like we had in Unreal, have pieces of code and scripts behind them. This is code, okay? This is describing the function of that car. And this is there to edit and to change and to learn from. Again, just like the listings back in the good old days, it's there, it's free, plenty of examples to start with to just mess around and you can do whatever you want and build whatever you want and get multiplayer gaming. And multiplayer gaming is actually really tricky to do normally if you just start from scratch, to build multiplayer servers and to build the understanding of where multiple machines are and who's in charge. If somebody hits something and it moves, how does that get transferred to everyone else? That's all taken care of. Again, it makes life incredibly or much easier, I would say. So I'm going to pop back to my little PowerPoint again. But while I do that, just in the background, I'm going to get that loading. Good. So we've done Unreal and we've done Roblox and Scratch, obviously. But now from current slide, there we are. But if you build something other than in Roblox, where are you going to put it, and how are you going to share it with people? How are people going to see this stuff? How are they going to engage with it? And another thing I would recommend having a look at, and this fits very much in the community space, is to look at Itch. And Itch.io is a community site for selling or giving games and game assets to other people. And people do make a living selling games on this platform, but it has all kinds of games, and it into all sorts of spaces, and they're kind of web games and multiplayer games and stuff. And but one of the important things that it has as well is, sorry about that. It has the ability for you to, if you make just a little something, like a little character, or make a sound that you're interested in or something, you can put those as assets. And here's some game assets. These are the free ones. There's ones you can buy. There's 12,000 results just on the site for little packs or examples of code, or or just a single character, single little person that you might want to drop in a game or even in a prototype to see if it works. And it's also it's very much community based, and they host and help people get together in game jams, where people come together from all over the world to work together on a particular subject or a particular topic or in a particular platform or genre to build a game. So it just says, right, you've got a week, or you've got a day, or you've got the weekend, or whatever. Other game jams, there's game jams all over the planet, but as you can see here, there's this. If I was on the web, this would scroll down. There are hundreds of them just this kind of week. So if you're really into get genre mash jams, so that's pulling different genres together. As I mentioned at the start, there's one been going on this week with people just trying to mix a card game with a shooter or something like that. And that it's a thing where you can find like-minded people if you want to, and it doesn't have to be forever, but you can kind of work together and see what people do. Look at AI in games or something, and work out what artificial intelligence might be in a game. And they've hosted, as I said up there, 141,000 games have been created out of the back of these. And that's hobbyists and professionals getting together and doing some interesting stuff. So, as I said, there's plenty of places to start and to get help and to find other people in similar positions, or to get advice and do things. And this is a prime example. And so definitely take a look at that. But then there's some kind of twists to gaming that I thought I might share with you. And Sansa is another virtual world. It was a spin-off effect originally from Second Life, but it's a virtual environment that you go in, and basically it's going in for music. It's a music venue, so it's to go to nightclubs and party and stuff and enjoy dancing, virtual dancing. And for me, I visit it in VR. So I put on my VR headset, and I also put on my total noise cancelling headphones, so all I hear is the music from this event. But I also wear a haptic vest. I've got this Wooja vest that I bought that bass sound vibrates speakers on it, so you feel the music. So I'm now at a venue. It's not necessarily music I really love that much, but I'm at a venue. All I can see, hear, and feel is that music with other people in the world with me. And me and my son went on the left there. We turned up to a Fatboy Slim gig. So he's a little kind of video avatar in there playing his set. So he's actually kind of playing the set live. And my son decided to come as a shark. Why not? I'm there rocking my guitar. And we couldn't go out. We were in lockdown anyway. But we had a party. And I think that ability, again, it's a different narrative. Everyone else was having a different party. They were hearing the same music, but the people they were with, the things they were experiencing, were all very different. And then you get this blend of stuff that's going on that you might want to consider as well with kind of physical gaming and with so Mario from Nintendo started off jumping up. He wasn't even really named character, he was just a plumber in Donkey Kong, on 2D arcade game back in the 80s. But he's now, I mean, you all must know Mario and recognize Mario, but they've worked together with Lego, and there's Lego Mario, and this little Lego character on the left there is a small little computing device. It's effectively an IoT device because it connects to an app, but it knows whether it's upside down, whether it's moving. It can animate the eyes. It can draw little messages on a little screen on his chest, and you use this to build a Lego run for him to do that looks like the sort of 2D one, and you physically bounce him around from thing to thing, and it's scoring you points by how well you do it. Which sounds mad, but it's gaming, and you are doing level design with Lego, and you are capturing. You can then say to your friends, "Here, you have a go," and yes, you can cheat, but that's not the point, is it? You still have to hit each thing, and for instance, you can make him do a flip. If you flip him over, makes a little flipping noise, just like Mario would, and maybe you get extra points from it. So you've got a little bit of extra style going on. Then you've got things, augmented reality is blending digital stuff with physical stuff. We're not there yet on full AR headsets and everything, but there's lots of augmented reality in gaming. There's lots of augmented reality games, though, you can find on iPhones and stuff like that, and Android. But on the Switch, Nintendo Switch, there's a version of Mario Kart that uses an actual radio-controlled car. So the little car on the right is the one that you drive around with your handheld gaming device, and the camera on top shows you the view from that car, but it also adds things to that view on your screen. So it shows you the track, and it shows you the coins that you might be picking up. So the picture in the middle is my kitchen, but the roadway and the coins are not real. They're not there. There's just a little cardboard arch with the number 2 written on, with the QR code on that the camera looks at, and it's fascinating stuff. And you can race 2 carts, and you can race against 2 physical, or up to 4 physical carts, I think. But we've got 2 physical carts that race with one another, and then it even does things that will speed up the cart. So if you go over a power up, the actual physical cart will go faster than it was going before. And so all these things sit there, and these are new ideas to explore, because this fusion of physical and digital is only going to get richer and richer as we have more robotics and more things going on, more things with AR and stuff. So bear that in mind. You can sit and make Lunar Lander, like I did. That's still good, a little 2D game, but the future might be something like this. And these exist, so there's even more future to have. And then there's the whole element of esports. So you might not necessarily want to build a game, but you might want to engage with games, either as being very good at it, say for instance in Formula One or any of the other driving games that have competitive leagues. There are professional esports drivers that work for Formula One teams. There are lots of esports, but Formula One I'm just mentioning because that was particularly good this year. Well, last year, as races got cancelled, they moved some of the sporting events to kind of pro celebrity esports things with the same sort of coverage and stuff like that. But there's also then being able to do things like being an esports commentator, and people make a living or have hobbies in commentating on these things, just like a normal sports commentator, because it's a sport. And so we run our group runs an esports commentary competition, and the latest one's there. And I'd love for any of you to enter. You just basically talk about a game in a whatever commentary style you want to do, record it and chuck it on YouTube or somewhere. All details go to the BCS Animation and Games link. You can enter that and see what's going on. And this was a really weird thing for BCS to do. They'd never done anything like this before, and we had to go through a whole lot of things to try and understand whether that was good or not. But it is, because it is part of us engaging with the tech industry. in a different way and with the games industry. So be a shoutcaster. And I'm just going to finish up here, just quickly talking about this. I'm not trying to plug my books, but I want you to know about why these are important to me and to my attitude to games. I sat and wrote these for what I was just about to start a new job, but it hasn't quite started yet. So I just thought, what shall I do? Can't take on new work. And I just accidentally wrote the first novel. And the core of it, the core character Roisin, is a gamer and a developer. So the way that the adventure spins out and the things that she solves is it's modern day sci-fi. It's like set this afternoon. She uses Unity. And so she describes how she builds stuff. So all the things that I've done and things that I've built are kind of and how I approach problem solving, both in games and in real world and physical world is kind of in that. And it's also all about AR and VR, and it fits in that space as well. So, but in building that, it was like building a software project. So we go back to those roles that I mentioned in gaming. It had a structure. It had I had kind of release targets and release dates to hit in my head. I was self-publishing, so it wasn't anybody else pushing me. But also, then when I got to publish it, I needed a cover, and the covers I built in Unity. So I used the game engine to build the covers. A bit of Photoshop as well, obviously, but the things were living environments, which I kind of nicely circular, and using words instead of code or graphics or sound. It's still world building, it's still narrative, and it's still there to help people. So even if you're not a programmer and you're not a gamer, you can still be a writer, because we've all got thoughts in our head, and tiniest of ideas can turn into all sorts of stories. But for me, the engagement that I have now with games has changed a little bit, because in the second book, one of the things that Roisin ends up doing is buying this island. Don't know. It's a long story. Well, no, it is a long story. It's supposed to be. Buying an island off the coast of Brazil. And this was an actual island that was for sale when I was researching the book. And I thought, well, yeah, that'll fit. I can work that. I want to see what that place looks like. And I looked at it on Google Earth and stuff like that. But now in Microsoft Flight Sim, I can, which is a game, but isn't, because it's just a simulation digital twin of the entire world. I can go anywhere in a plane and see the entire world at any point in any kind of weather condition. But I can now visit the island that was part of my book by flying over it. And so again, this internal narrative, which I'm sharing with you, but this internal narrative that makes that experience that much better for me. And that's my narrative of that. And this goes a little bit further in that another thing that Unreal have is a new tool called MetaHuman. And it's a cloud-based tool, so you don't have to install anything. It's a cloud-based tool to generate or help you build highly detailed people. And I'm not a graphic designer. You can probably tell from my layout and stuff, but I went into this and I started merging some faces together, because that's the easiest way you do. So I had a little bit of this face, a little bit of this. And I came up with Roisin from Reconfigure. So my lead character then became a digital asset, a animatable figure. And if this works, this will be a miracle. But if I go back to my sharing again, one more thing over here and here. And so I'm now back in Unreal. And here she is, not moving about very much, but this is in the MetaHuman demo that Unreal produced. So you could explore how these animatable characters worked. But I swapped out the one from the demo and put Roisin in. And so this is all their camera work, all their animation, all their dialogue, but my person from my book coming to life. And hopefully if I press play, if I suddenly disappear, it's because my machine's crashed. But there we are. So this is Roisin. And you may not be able to, I'm not sure if you get the audio, but look at that view. The subtlety of the movement, all from something that I just put together on a cloud service. So that is the power now of the tooling, that we're now at a point, and I shall come out of that and go back to my PowerPoint. So slick this, isn't it? Here we go. So we're now at a point where just sat at home using something I've seldom used before. I've now got the ability to potentially start creating a movie or a game or a short or some photos or some promotional material, but it's all sat and based on game tech, and it's not overly difficult because the tooling's there. The difficult bit is coming up with the idea and what do you want to put and what do you want to structure and where do you want to place it. But I would say that I would not have imagined to be here talking to you about trying to potentially, as a side project, make a movie on a computer when I think about what I was doing, sat in my bedroom doing a lunar lander in text and sending it off to computer and video games. So if that's happened for me, imagine where that could take you guys in the future. I mean, you've got all the tools are there, all the opportunities there. So I would suggest you just need to kind of dive in and just summing up even the smallest of ideas. You can publish it and share it. Don't worry about too much about keeping hold of the intellectual property and stuff. And this is like really, really fantastic. But the more you share, the more you put on GitHub, the more you put on Roadblocks, the more you put on itch.io. It's all there. Share it. You can treat it as a hobby, as a professional, somewhere in between. If you want to find people like you that are interested in what you do and have your interests, you can. If you want to do everything on your own, you can. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening. And I really do look forward to seeing what you'll create, because I'm sure at least one of you is going to build something lovely, if not all of you. And with that, I shall open up to questions. I wasn't not able to see the chat, but if anyone's got any questions, happy to take them now.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes, for that interesting and informative presentation. If anyone has any questions, you can ask. We can have a little Q&A session. I think Edwin asks, when one is choosing, should they choose Unreal or Unity, or Unreal over Unity, or the other way around?
It's either or both. I mean, there's at the moment Unreal's got. I've been exploring Unreal, having not used it before, primarily because of that MetaHuman piece, because I want to know what that did. But Unity has a whole set of tooling as well that does some wonderful stuff and lots of examples and lots of pieces of education and things. And both, if you from a career point of view, if you're thinking kind of longer term, both are high-end tools used by almost equally, I would say, by game studios. Not all of them use Unity and Unreal, but if you know what goes on in Unreal, or you know what goes on in Unity, you're going to be able, that's quite transferable to some degree, because the underlying thing you're trying to do is the same. It might just be a little, the button's in a different place, or it's called something slightly different. So rather, like if you know how to program in one language, you can learn to program in another. Doesn't necessarily make you the instant expert, but it's all transferable. So these are high-end tools that you can explore absolutely everything, and they're both free. So you could just download both of them and see which one feels best, which one you get on with, or which one you like the initial experience with. So I honestly wouldn't suggest picking one over the other. Pick both.
Siddharth asks, can you advise some good courses for Unreal Engine?
I think, Unreal, like Unity, I think they have their own set of tutorials and courses. So I'd start with what they have on their site. But I wouldn't. There are so many people doing little bits and pieces that I don't think you need a whole. You don't need to treat it as a whole kind of educational course. You need to find something you want to do or that you're interested in, and then see if somebody has done it already and how they may have shared it. So that MetaHuman import, and because I didn't quite know where everything was, there was somebody that had well, it was slightly different bit of the project, but somebody had done a project to do face capture from a webcam to animate the character, and that they just put that on YouTube. So I looked at it, I followed it, and thought, oh, that's how it works. And so I wouldn't suggest, it's not like you don't need to go and do a kind of month or year long or 5-year degree course or something on it. Just find the thing that you would like to do, and then try and find the tool and the assets that somebody else might be sharing.
Great. Dilka asks, I'm currently working on developing a game using Unreal. I was hoping I could upload it on itch.io. However, the game size is large. I was wondering if you have an advice on optimization and reducing the size of the game.
Well, that's a good one. I mean, it depends how large is large, but I mean, full size games do get released on itch.io. So I've got there was an early development kind of kickstarted one in VR, which is a full big download. So yes, it's big, but optimization depends what sort of game you're doing, what sort of quality hit you can take by maybe changing the level of detail on models and things, because you don't necessarily have to have everything there all the time in full ray trace wonder. That Unreal has some, as does Unity, some sort of batching things that can help you choose which bit you need at which point, and which are common assets. So I mean, optimization is an entire subject. Again, I would dive into what they're doing. I mean, look at given Unreal's just released their Unreal 5, they've got some incredible optimization for scenery, so that they're making sort of 1080p scenery look like 4K scenery through the tooling doing some stuff for you. So there's no one, I mean, there's no one specific thing I can point at to say fix it to help, but the tools are there, and there are people that and tooling to specialize in kind of doing that. And it may be restructuring the game in a different way, cheating a bit and using assets more often, and just changing the color of them every now and then, so you're using the same mesh, makes it smaller. Lots of potential, but it's a difficult one to give one answer to, but it's doable.
For sure. Ali asks, favorite game
Of all time, I'm still very partial to Grand Theft Auto 5. It's something I keep going back to, but also I've got in my heart, I've got Elite, because the original Elite was fantastic back in the olden days, and Elite Dangerous, and now Elite Odyssey, with the hugeness of the universe, and being able to do it in VR is just wonderful. I don't get to play it enough, because you have to spend so much time kind of remembering where everything is and what you do. But every time I put the headset on and go flying off, it takes me back to my childhood and back to my building stuff, but I'm sitting there in the future. So Elite.
Okay, Mahmoud asks, have you ever worked in a game company?
Not directly in a game company. That's the thing. So I've worked and I've advised game companies, and I've built. So most of my stuff was when I was at IBM. We weren't a game company, but we were building, amongst other things, there was an early thing for downloadable content and currency and stuff like that we built, and so I built sort of a top-down driving game for that. But the being in a AAA game company, I haven't done, and again that's part of the interesting thing, because I know how they work and I talk to them a lot, but they don't necessarily all get what the rest of the IT industry is and what enterprise is. And so I kind of try and sit, all through my career, I've kind of sat in the middle of that, but never say never.
Yeah. Edwin asks, do you have any suggestions for an enterprise developer how to start with creating a game? What's the best source to learn about game design, not the programming part?
Well, it's a game. The what is game? What makes things fun? Raf Costa's book that I mentioned that is worth having a look at, because it will spark your mind as to what it is about play or about games that you may be interested in. So if you've got a concept or a thing or a little bit of storyline or something like that, you kind of need to start fleshing that out with what might the mechanics be, regardless of what programming language you use and what environment. What makes it a game? Is it actually a board game you're supposed to be making, or is it? I would like the example with my novels, that there was a thing, an image in my head, which kind of came from gaming, but became the seed for the entire couple of books and the third one, if ever I get around to writing it. And so it's finding that, if you like, finding the intent. And so whatever can inspire. I mean, finding inspiration is a lifelong thing for us all, isn't it? But I think books like Raf's one will make you think about gaming and design in a different way.
Ryan asks, although I'm sorry if I pronounce anyone's names incorrectly, they ask, are there any specific certifications you can recommend to get into game development?
I would say probably not. There's again, the games industry is very, if you're talking about kind of pure games industry, big AAA stuff, lots of people just tend to arrive at that. You apply for a job and they say, well, what have you done? And so your portfolio of work, or your things that you've shared, or how many things you've put on GitHub or Itch.io or something, they become your CV more so than maybe a certification. There are courses, and there are courses in game design, and that qualification though doesn't necessarily that can be viewed in all different ways. And if you're gaining something from it because you like doing it, then that's great. But I think it's the what you produce and the output you've got more so than the qualification. Unlike maybe some other more enterprise things where if you do a certification in a particular product or in a particular language, then that's got probably more respect in the enterprise world than it has in the gaming world, because it's a bit more renegade, if you like. And again, you can just do it yourself and build things, or you can get together in small groups and build things. If you keep it all to yourself though, then it's very difficult to then, if you want to apply for a job or engage with a company, to say, they will say, well, what have you got? What have you done?
Junaid asks, which company is your favorite to work in, or in your opinion have the best games?
I wouldn't be able to say to work in, because again, if I haven't worked in them, and there's a lot of, particularly in the big games. I mean, you maybe saw all the press that happened with Cyberpunk and stuff. There have a lot of panic and crush as they come to release dates, where everyone starts working ridiculous hours and burning out and stuff like that. And the industry's trying to get around that. But the best games is again quite subjective, isn't it? But I think what Microsoft is doing through its Game Pass and through its acquisitions of Bethesda and things like that, its stock of games and studios, of which there are many studios in there, are producing some of the most fantastic stuff. And it's not something I would have, especially I used to work for IBM, so Microsoft were a competitor back then, way back in the day. It's not something I would have seen Microsoft doing, but they have. So the stuff with the Xbox and the stuff with cloud gaming and the stuff with what goes in the PC, and the changing the dynamic with how we buy games with Game Pass as sort of more a Netflix thing, is going to generate some even more interesting stuff, I think.
Okay, Zahra asks, how did you get into game development?
I grew up in a seaside town in the UK called Great Yarmouth, and we had a lot of amusement arcades, which were mostly shut during the winter, but in the summer they open up for the tourists. And so from I was born in '67, so round about '77 when Star Wars was happening and Space Invaders was arriving and stuff like that, I was looking at this stuff and I thought, how does it work? I looked at Space. Well, it was probably even before Space Invaders, but how did that thing on that screen know where it was, and how did I manage to shoot it and make it go away? How did that work? And I just became obsessed with how it worked. I started building board games to try and work out how you might do stuff. I built a board game of asteroids. It was a ridiculously complicated thing to try and do, and then the computers were arriving, and schools started to have a kind of a computing club even before we had kind of O levels and stuff, or so 10, 11 years old. And so I just started tinkering with things, and I'd tinkered with electronics and stuff beforehand, so I'd kind of made little electronic games that made LEDs go on and off and things like that. But it was just that, how does this work? And I remember the point when I was sat in a computer club at school run by one of the teachers, where they explained a loop to me. And I mean, a loop that goes and then stops for some reason is kind of the core thing of most computing, but that's the game loop. That's the thing. And I thought, oh, so that's how it moves, because it's a loop. And that's how it stops moving when it gets the event it wasn't an event type, but when it gets the trigger to say it's been made contact with something. And that was it then. And so my entire programming career has been based around why a one pixel hit another and made it disappear.
Okay, I think we're running a bit short on time, so we can ask one last question. Mahmoud asks, have you ever published a full game before?
Not published a full game, but not for people to buy, but the full games and game environments that I've built that were used. I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate thing for me, but they were used in amongst a small community of people. So we built a health. Well, me and one graphic designer built a healthy eating kind of environment. That sounds weird, but part of that we ended up building while people were waiting. It was for kids. While kids were going to go into this environment, we built a waiting room that ended up being into a whole platforming game, because that's what we did. And we were looking at it going, we should release this, shouldn't we? Because it was had loads of spinning things and jumping things and changes, and I built a level editor for him, and we could put all those things together. So yeah, no, I haven't done that, but I've been paid professionally for building things that are built in game engines. So instead, that's why I wrote the book. So my book, I would say, is my game for posterity.
Okay, great. So I think we can conclude the session because we're running a bit short on time. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Mr. Hughes, for accepting our invitation and providing us with this informative and incredibly useful presentation. We hope to stay in touch with you for future events as well. And
absolutely.
I hope everyone learned a lot from this presentation and will join us for future events as well.
Thank you very much. They're wonderful questions as well. That was awesome, and thank you so much for asking me and inviting me. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.